Welcome back. I am your co-host today, Mark Cook, and of course you know Keith Reynolds out here on the Morning Joe.
Morning coffee.
Morning Coffee, Morning Joe. It's all the same,
It's
right?
all the same.
Except for it's completely different right now. We're going to be talking to Dave Corsi, who wants to talk about the fair tax. Now, we were talking a little bit behind the scenes here. We need to get educated on what this is because it sounds like a completely different structure than what people are used to right now.
Okay. First, thank you for having me on, and you're absolutely right. It is totally different. In effect, what we're doing is a whole new paradigm. You're getting rid of the current code, which is based on income, and replacing it with a national consumption tax. The fair tax is a federal tax, and what it means is when you go buy a new good or service, you pay tax when you purchase the item, and then you're done. There is no tax forms to fill out. It will replace your income tax, payroll taxes, no more worrying about having to pay Social Security taxes, estate taxes, corporate taxes, all those taxes you've always been worried about and having to pay are now done away with. You pay it there and you don't have to worry about an audit. To me, one of the great things about the fair tax is control goes back to you. In other words, right now, what do? How many times do you hear about a company and they have to look at the quote tax ramifications or something?
Right.
Or you and your spouse, you have to worry about tax ramifications. And the government controls you. If you remember when Bill Clinton was president, he made the comment when he was bragging one year about a surplus that, well, we'd like to give you back your money, but we don't know if you would spend it right. I mean, think about that.
Right.
He's literally telling you that it's not your money, it's his money, and if he feels like it, he will give it to you. We are adults. We should have control of our own money, and the beauty of the fair tax is you decide what tax you pay. Now, one of the funny things is, I was interviewed one time in the Asbury Park Press, and the editor made a comment to me that kind of blew my mind. She mentioned, well, what if everybody stops buying things? I said, okay, you get paid, right? You get paid by the press, right? Yes. And after they take out your taxes, they give you a check. Yes. So then I'm assuming from what you just told me, you and your husband take it out, put it on your kitchen table, and stare at it. She says, well, no, we have to buy. I said, exactly. Why would anybody, we all raise money to do what, ultimately? To consume, to buy stuff.
Right.
You know, and by doing the fair tax, you get control. Everybody can control their own destiny. And you will now have approximately 300 million people paying the tax. Everybody now has skin in the game. Mitt Romney kind of got in trouble when the last go around because he mentioned that 47% of the people aren't paying taxes. Under the fair tax, everybody will be paying. Whether you could be an illegal alien, you could be a criminal, because even criminals go buy fur coats for their girlfriends or Mercedes or whatever they buy. Tourists coming to America, they buy things, they will pay the tax. And it's a better way to fund Social Security. Right now, Social Security, let's face it, is a Ponzi scheme that is bankrupt. Medicare, the same thing. And right now there's a limit, is there not, on Social Security? I think about 113,000. After that, there's no longer any tax paid on it. Under the fair tax, you would literally have every time you buy an item, a portion of that goes to pay for and fund Social Security. And consumption historically has always been much more stable than income. Every year since before the Great Depression, consumption has risen every year, even during the Depression, simply because population increases. So by that, you've always increased your consumption year in and year out.
But you know what? Now, when you say fair tax, like I get it. But are you saying that when you're purchasing something, I go out and purchase a stick of gum or whatever?
Yes.
You're saying the tax should be raised, so it's just a flat rate?
The tax would be there's a flat rate. It's a flat tax, but based on consumption instead of on income.
Okay, so you're saying that versus, someone buys a stick of gum 200,000 times a year,
right,
versus someone that buys a car or whatever, you know what I mean,
right,
higher or lower
right,
or whatever,
yes.
That means that should be taxed more or lower.
It'll be taxed at the same rate. For instance, let me give you an example.
Yeah, because...
Excuse me. You buy a $100 coat at the store.
Right.
You pay the tax on that $100. tax rate excluding that $100 would be taxed at 30%. So you would go to the store and pay $130 for that coat,
Right.
and now you're done. In other words, you don't have to go home then and file an income tax, you don't have to do anything. Now, a lot of people, the first reaction, I'm sure, is they hear, oh my gosh, 30%. Let's break it down. What do you pay in payroll? When you buy a $100 coat today, how much money do you need to earn to buy that $100 coat? If you're in the lowest tax bracket, roughly, let's say 15%, so you have to earn 15 there, you have to pay 7.5 in payroll tax. So
Right.
now you've had to earn at least $122.50 for that same coat. Meanwhile, under the fair tax, you've received your entire paycheck. Someone who's paid $1,000 a week in New Jersey would roughly come home with a net check of $940. The only thing that would be taken out is your state taxes. Because as I mentioned before, the fair tax is a federal tax. So you come home with the $940. Under the current code, if you're in a 15% tax bracket, you'll come home maybe with about $700 to $725. So you automatically already have $225 more in your pocket.
But it doesn't change any of your state tax structure, so.
No, it does not.
So how does this differentiate than like Dick Armey's flat tax and some of the other kind of similar but different plans of the
The
past?
big difference is Dick Armey's flat tax was based at 17% on income. Plus, you still had to pay payroll tax. So even if you didn't
Okay.
pay the flat tax, the income tax was still there. Keep in mind, I mentioned that there is no longer will be any corporate tax. Big dirty secret more and more people are catching on to is corporations don't pay taxes.
Right.
Ultimately, you, the consumer, pay it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's included. When you bought those sticks of gum or that coat, didn't the corporation include that in their cost of doing business?
Right.
So they already factored that in. Under the fair tax, we're saying you'll be taking out all those embedded taxes that are added to each level of the product being produced. For instance, somebody producing a loaf of bread, the farmer has to grow it, there's taxes on him. The plastic manufacturer, the baker, the delivery man, everybody's paying tax. If suddenly all those corporate taxes are taken out, the price of the coat most likely will be reduced.
So what you're saying is that cost of goods is going to go down and personal wealth will go up.
Exactly. And a lot of people, I know you're probably thinking, wait a minute, how do we know to lower the price of the coat, right? Jackie Robinson proved it, right?
The baseball player.
The baseball player. Back in 1947, the Brooklyn Dodgers had already made their decision. Jackie Robinson was going to be the first black major leaguer in the last 100 years. So their decision was made. Who really had a decision to make at that point?
Jackie Robinson.
Nope.
So,
Every other major league owner. Suddenly,
Wow.
they had to think about, now they could have been racist, they could have been, who knows? It didn't matter. The
Right.
free market proved it had to come out with an honest answer, because they were going to look back and say, okay, are we going to let the Brooklyn Dodgers get all the best black ball players out of the Negro League, which means they will win the pennant every year, because
Right.
with the best black ball players and some of the best white ball players,
They'll be
they become a
unstoppable.
dynasty.
Right.
They are unstoppable.
Right.
So now, let's say an owner of another team's a racist. Didn't matter. He had to start. If he was going to compete, he was going to have to start looking at the Negro League. That's the beauty of the free market. It forces those things. And, for instance, airlines. When one airline lowers its fare to Florida, what do they all do? Competition.
Right.
Therefore, Keith, if you were going to keep that coat at $100, Mark says, you know what, I could get more market share. Therefore, do the math. I'll end up with a bigger profit at the end. I'm like Walmart, produce more, make more profit. I'm simply going to turn around and lower my price to 90. Now, you're going to be sitting there going, well, I guess I got to lower it.
you know what? You're
Wants to
absolutely right.
compete, yeah.
You know what? Being my old retail days, many moons ago, I was working with a drug emporium who believed in getting a smaller margin, but turning a lot
Right.
of it. Versus a Rite Aid that sells a big ticket item all the time.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that's
Walmart,
the
the Walmart philosophy.
Walmart philosophy. That's
Obviously, people can go to fairtax.org and find out more about it, but Where are you guys at? What is the organization in terms of?
We have a national organization, and it's at www.fairtax.org on the net, and every state has its own individual fair tax organization. Right now, in the U.S. Congress, the bill is H.R. 25 in the House. The main sponsor is Rob Woodall from Georgia. Right now, we have over 70 sponsors, co-sponsors. Because a lot of these folks realize something has to give.
Right.
I ran for Congress 2 times, 12th Congressional District. Didn't win by. But one of the main reasons I ran was because I was trying to explain to people, if we do not do something about the tax code of this country, we are going to destroy it. To me, if we don't change our tax code, we're doomed. Eventually, if you ever study the history of the Roman Empire, etc., what really made them falter was when their tax code became the tipping point where fewer people were actually paying tax and everybody was just kind of living off the dole.
Right, because if the numbers continues and the percentages continue to go up, it's not going to make people poor. They're just going to stop paying.
Exactly.
It's
Right. And there is no way currently, under the current tax code, we can ever pay off the $19 trillion in debt. Mathematically impossible.
Right.
Even legalizing pot. We're gonna take a quick commercial break, and we're right back.
Choosing the right fence for your home or business is an important decision to make. Choose a Nello fence for peace of mind. Our family has manufactured and installed beautiful maintenance-free fence for over 50 years. We provide vinyl, aluminum, and wood fence in a wide variety of styles and colors, including chain-link fence for commercial and residential. Call or visit our indoor showroom and ask for Steve Anello and see how 4 generations of combined experience mean that you'll get quality and service that can't be matched by any other fencing company, period. Call Anello Fence today for a free estimate.
Today's show has been sponsored by More Than Gifts. Come see our new location in Marlton, New Jersey. Not just gifts, but more.
All right, we're back on Morning Coffee. I am today's co-host, Mark Cook. You all know Keith Reynolds, and we're here today with Dave Corsi from fairtax.org. We're talking about this fair tax, which is a new structure that this organization wants to put in, which is going to eliminate all of your other federal taxes and put in a flat tax rate for all of your consumer goods.
Right, based on consumption, and it's only on new goods. If you buy a used item, the tax has in theory already been paid.
Okay.
So therefore, if you buy a used car, there is no tax. It has been paid. Now, one of the things people point out is, well, then people will stop buying new cars, which isn't true. Because first off, the new car manufacturer will be competitive, but also, what eventually happens to used cars? They wear out. So sooner or later, you're going to have pent-up demand. I mean, this is basic supply and demand economics, but people don't think the whole thing through and realize eventually people will buy new cars. And if people have more money in their pocket, they tend to buy what they want. For instance, I've always had people tell me that, oh, I only buy based on price. Really? My thing when I talk to them is, well, what color's your Yugo?
Right.
And they look like, well, what do you mean? I
What are you
said, well,
talking about,
Yugo's the cheapest car out there. At the time, this was years ago. I said, Yugos are the cheapest car, so what color is it? Well, I said, because you don't see yourself, that's not your self-image of yourself.
That's right. You know, Dave, we talked about, as far as the tax codes or whatever, as far as the, being in place, how long have they been in place?
The current
The
tax
history.
code started around 1913 at the same time with the Federal Reserve. Big history there. Jekyll Island was where they started with the Federal Reserve, and about the same time, we had an income tax years ago during the Civil War. Then it was done away with. The Supreme Court back in the 1800s actually ruled income tax being unconstitutional. 16th Amendment was added, which gave them the ability to now tax us based on income. Fine. Then what happened was when the income tax was originally passed, it was a flat tax. Flat rate only on basically the millionaire class. And they said it will never be more than, I think, 5%. 5%. And then little by little, they do what we call negotiating the salami technique. Little by little, they encroached till we got to a point where it was over 90%. George Harrison, the song Taxman of the Beatles, basically, they had a 90% tax rate. It was at 19 for you and 1 for me.
Right.
They had a 90% tax rate. That's why a lot of rock stars had moved out of England. And the same thing in this country. People produce less. Ronald Reagan said he became a, quote, conservative Republican when his accountant said to him that you can only make 3 movies a year. And he said, why?
Right.
You'll net more money by making less movies than if you make any more than 3, you'll actually lose money.
Because you're right.
Right.
Because of the taxes that are coming out.
Rolling Stones refuse to play in England because they will actually lose money on it.
Let me ask you this, though, because I think a lot of people are wondering, is that flat, does this fair tax give enough money to be able to fund what's there as we need it?
Great question. The fair tax at the rate I mentioned, the 30%, would be revenue neutral, meaning it is supposed to raise the same amount of money that we currently raise.
Okay.
Personally, it'll raise a lot more. Remember I mentioned all embedded taxes come out and we do away with corporate taxes? What is the #1 reason American companies don't bring the money in? When you hear about that money being out there, Burger King moving, Halliburton, etc., why did they move out? 35% corporate tax rate. We have the highest tax rate of any industrialized nation in the world. You're the head of GM. You have $100 million offshore. You're told, well, Keith, you can bring it back, but we're going to have to pay $35 million of it right off the top to Uncle Sam. Are you going to do it? No. Of course not. That's
Right.
common sense. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
It's common sense. Nobody in their right mind would do it. So therefore, the money stays away. GM has never lost money, ever, in any year. Now we say, wait a minute, we bailed them out.
Right.
Internationally, they made a profit.
Right.
But there was no way they were going to bring it back here and pay a 35% tax rate. So the U.S. taxpayer had the privilege, shall we say, of paying it.
Right.
It's absolutely disgraceful.
And it's not, it will never come back. It's not coming back. And that's, I think, what people are realizing now, that, yes, that was a situation where it had to happen in 2009 and 2010. But don't for 1 second think that any of that money is going back into the government.
Exactly. Politicians always talk about what? Jobs, jobs, jobs. If we did away with our corporate tax rate, how many companies would be flooding back here creating jobs here? Because now they can compete. Right now, if a car is made in America and is sold in France, they have to pay all those U.S. taxes, and then when the car is sold in France, the money, if it was repatriated back to America, you pay the 35% tax rate. If you take a country like France, Peugeot sells a car in America made in France, they take that off the price. So our companies automatically are at a disadvantage in
Wow.
trade. One of the reasons every month we have a $45 billion trade imbalance.
Wow.
You know, we have to stop letting politicians do this to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because, you know, the government seems so desperate, a lot of the stuff that they're doing for money, because, like, look at the, I was getting ready to say Uber, but not the Uber, but the football, the FanDuel and DraftKings.
yeah.
Right.
This whole thing is because the government's trying to get money from these
Amen.
guys.
Amen.
You know, and look, I know that the government needs to have money to run, I get that. But, I mean, you're just going after people that, you know, entrepreneurs and people that are trying to create businesses in our
Right.
country.
Which will bring them more money if they weren't so not short-sighted.
Yes, absolutely, agree 100%.
And you're absolutely right. And bringing jobs back in this country, you will raise more revenue. But the biggest problem is, the reason politicians generally are not for it, they lose control over us. Right now, they can reward and punish you by
Right.
how they work the tax code. Yes, we're going to give you a benefit for buying a house. No, we're not going to give you a benefit for doing this. Whatever it is. Under the fair tax, remember what I said originally? You now get control of your own taxable situation. In other words, the government doesn't trust us. They're going to do it for us.
Right.
But now, they would lose control. Lobbyists. What is the #1 reason there are lobbyists on K Street in Washington? Tax code. Trying to get some kind of tax benefit. Under the fair tax, everybody kind of goes the same. One final thing I really would like to mention, because a lot of folks may be thinking about it, well, isn't this unfair to the poor folks? Because, quite frankly, Warren Buffett goes out and buys a loaf of bread and pays a tax. It's not the same as a poor person.
Right.
The beauty of the fair tax is it has an item called the prebate, meaning the fair tax will every month fund you a certain amount of money that is to cover the tax on the basic necessities of what you purchase, whether you're Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, or a single mom on a very limited income. It's based on what the U.S. sets out a table every year of the poverty level. And for instance, for a family of 4, they'll say it's about $28,000. and they base it on roughly a 23% tax rate, which I'll explain in a minute. So that comes to about between $6,000 and $7,000 a year. So at the beginning of every month, you would get a check in the mail for about $550 that will cover the tax on what you're paying. So you and Warren Buffett are now on an equal plane. I mentioned 23% because, politicians love to use figures like, well, the tax rate on a fair tax is 30%, which it is on top of what you purchased. However, if you include it in the item, that $130 coat, $30 divided by 130 equals 23%. Now, I've had people tell us, well, that's a dishonest way to do it. We say, well, why don't you do that then with the current code that you're defending? For instance, if you make $100 and 23 of it goes to pay tax, 23 into 77 that's left, 100 minus that, it's like 33%. So if you want to play
Higher.
that game, why don't we talk about the tax rate being effectively 33%, and that doesn't include payroll tax.
Right, and it's 10 percentage ticks higher.
Right. So we tell them, we'll use 23% or 30%, we'll use
Whatever
whichever one
number
you
you
want.
want,
But
right.
be fair.
Right.
You guys do the same thing, and they don't appreciate that because
Right.
now they're being called out on it.
So we're in a big year. 2016 not only is a presidential election year, we have a lot of local and Senate and House and a lot of turnover is going to happen. So are there any candidates that are getting behind this?
Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee, one of the biggest, he's unfortunately not moving up in the
Right.
polls, but he is a big proponent of the fair tax. Now, Ted Cruz, he has a different tax plan, but he's aware of it, and he's kind of been on the fence. Rubio, I'm not sure about. Hillary and Bernie, forget.
This
They're
is
just-
more of a
yeah,
Republican
they're
idea.
just, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, of all the sponsors in the House and Senate right now, I believe they're all Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And we do talk to Democratic senators. Now, in New Jersey, we're proud to announce last year, we've gotten our first co-sponsor, Congressman Garrett of the 5th District, signed on. And we've been involved roughly for 15 years in New Jersey, talking to our elected representatives, giving them little presentations on a fair tax, explaining it, and we're making inroads. It is a lot tougher up here.
Right.
I mean, you go to a place like Georgia, and a fair tax is a household name. Everybody there knows it. Just about every representative there is a supporter. It's the way to go. If we do not do something, we are literally putting our kids at such a disadvantage. They'll never be able to pay that tax.
Wow.
Well, you know what, this concludes morning coffee. I mean, Dave, I could probably talk another hour
Yeah.
to you. That was great information. We'll have to have you come back, but tell our listeners where they can find out more information, where they can find you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. You can find it, the main website would be www.fairtax.org. And then from there, you could go off onto different states that have it. But the main one for information, or just quite frankly, Google Fair Tax. And you can learn all about it.
Okay. And he's a double for Scott Tanker, we're told, one of our other hosts that does a morning coffee lunch, or it's actually changing next week with, it's called Breakfast with the Boss. So Dave's going to fill in for Scott when he's not here. I'm told he looks just like him. What you got to do? You really do look like Scott. And I want to thank my show co for today, Mark Cook, for coming on to Morning Coffee.
Thanks
it
for
was
having
great.
me.
We had a great day.
It was a lot of fun.
Next week, please make sure you stay tuned. We have a great next week lined up. A lot of new guests. We got the ladies coming back. Charlene and Carol will be back on the Morning Coffee. Ira Weissman will be joining us on Wednesday in Morning Coffee. So we are action-packed next week. Have a great weekend. I'm Keith Reynolds signing off for Morning Coffee.